You ever been a developer playing Minecraft and you just go up to a block and you're like, well, how do I do that? How do I hold down the mouse button and when I let go it resets the block, but if I hold it down all the way, it mines it. And if I use different items, they should mine things fast. Well, here in this little tutorial, we're going to figure out how to do that. Let's get to it. Alright, so hopping into Unity here, one of the first things you'll notice is that I actually have imported an asset from the asset store. And this is just the first person controller that's free. I'll put a link to it down in the description. And if you want to import this asset, you just go up to Window and you'll go to Asset Store. It'll have you log in online. And then once you've gone online and added it to your package manager, you can go into Package Manager and just import it right down here. And it'll install everything here. And in order to get to the scene, you go down here and go to First Person Controller. You'll go to Scenes and just click on the playground. And when you run it here, we can see that by default, it's going to have the ability to look around, move, jump, and this is just the basis so we can get started and actually work on the mining portion of this tutorial. And for this tutorial, we're actually going to need 3 different scripts. And let's go ahead and create them here. We're going to create a block script. So this is just going to be the script used for all the blocks in the game. That'll be an easy script to add. Next, we're going to add we'll let it load up here. We're going to do a mine timer. So this is going to be used whenever we're actually trying to mine a block. In Minecraft, you can see if you just like tap on the block or just click on it, it's not going to fully mine, it's going to reset itself. And so this timer is basically going to do the same thing, where if you're holding down the mouse button, it will continue to mine it, and if you let go of it, it's going to stop mining. And then the last one we are going to be adding is actually going to be a scriptable object. And these are going to be for the different items that you could have in the game. We will call this item SO. And this scriptable object is just going to hold the data for the items we're going to be using. So if you want to use a pickaxe or a regular axe or just your hand, this will be able to determine whether or not you're using the right item by, like, a given block will have a specific item that it's good for. So grass in Minecraft is mined very quickly by shovels, and stone is mined very quickly by pickaxes, and this will basically replicate the same thing. So let's go ahead and get into the block script and work on that. Alright, here in the block script, I'll go ahead and lay out the basic structure of the script, and then I'll get into what it's actually doing. Alright, so we have the basic structure here, and if we go from top to bottom, we have a serialized field, so it's going to show up in the inspector. We have a mine time, so this is going to be the time it takes for the block to actually be destroyed when you're actually mining it. Next, we have another serialized field going to show up in the inspector. This is going to be the item type. I'm calling it best item, so this is going to So in the inspector, you'll be able to choose which item type will mine that specific block faster. So if you have a grass block, we'll just set it to a shovel. If you have a stone block, we can set it to a pickaxe. If you have a wood block, you can set it to an axe. Then next, we have an elapsed time. So this is going to keep track of how much you've actually mined of the block. And so this will be basically just determining if the elapsed time is less than or greater than or less than the actual mine time. If it's greater than, we'll go ahead and destroy the block. If not, we'll keep mining. And then being mined is just a boolean to determine whether the player is actually holding down that mouse button and actually mining the block. So let's go ahead and fill out these methods and we'll be right back. Alright, now that we've finished these methods, let's go ahead and go over them. So we have the mine method. This is going to be called every time the player clicks on an actual mineable object. And we're just going in here, and this first little block here, basically saying if the block hasn't started mining. So by default, it's not going to be mining. So we'll go ahead and check. If it's not being mined, we're going to go ahead and say it is being mined. So the button is being held down. And we're going to go ahead and go into our singleton mine timer and go ahead and start that timer. And so that will basically start the timer, and if the player lets go, it's going to restart it and reset the block. And then, so once we've done this, and also since we're going to be updating this every single frame and checking to see if we're mining or not, this first block here will only run once. And so the next time it's being called, it's going to go to this line, and it's going to check to see if the elapsed time is greater than or equal to the mine time. So if you've actually fully mined the block, we're going to go ahead and break it, and that will destroy the game object down here. So if the elapsed time is not greater than the mine time, we're going to go ahead and restart that mine timer. And this is basically just determining whether the player is still holding down the mine button or not. And then next we have if the best item is equal to the current item type. So this is basically where you're getting that the grass is being mined faster by a shovel. And if that's the case, we're going to get this, and we're going to set this float value to time.delta time. And this, you can see, is the interval of seconds between the last frame and the current one. So if we don't have any, if we just have time.delta time, it's just going to count up normally, like any stopwatch. And since we're doing it in this if statement, we're doing it times the current item.mining speed. So this is, if we're using a shovel, we're going to multiply it by 1.25 just to get a little bit faster speed. And then down here, we're basically saying if we don't have the correct item, we're just going to go up by a normal amount of time. Next, we have this break method, and this is just going to stop that mine timer and destroy the game object. Down here, we have the reset block, and so this is when we have basically either moved the cursor off of the block or we have let go of the mine button. This is basically going to set the block being mined to false, and we're going to go ahead and restart that elapsed time. So if it took 5 seconds to mine a block and we were up to 4 seconds and we've stopped mining, this is going to reset it back to 0. So you can't go from 4 seconds back to 5, just restarting it there. And then lastly, we have this enum, and you can just add any type of item you want. I got the shovel, pickaxe, axe. And so this is the whole thing. Here at the start, we're go ahead and just subscribe to the mine timers event, and on disable we're unsubscribing so we don't get any errors here. So that's the whole block class, and we'll go ahead and get into the next script. Alright, we're here in the mine timer class, and this is going to be a singleton class. And if you don't know, a singleton is just going to be a script that can only be instantiated once. If there are more than one, it's going to destroy it. And this will make sure that there's only one mine timer going on at a time. Now, if you did want to implement this for multiplayer, you would have to change this and have multiple timers going on. But for our instance, it's going to be single player, and we don't have a way to mine multiple blocks at once. So this will be used here. And let's go ahead and get the basic structure of the class, and I'll be right back. Alright, so we'll go ahead and stop right here. So this start method is basically where we get the singleton pattern. And so we're basically saying here at the top we have a single instance of this mine timer, and it's good practice to use the capital I instance. And we're basically saying if there happens to be a case where there has already been a mine timer created, we'll go ahead and destroy that game object. And if that's not the case, if instance is equal to null, we're going to go ahead and set instance to this single instance of this class, so there will only be one at a time. Alright, we've gone ahead and gone through the entire structure of the class. And so here we have a start timer. This is basically just going to start the timer. So here in the update method, it's going to be, this will change a Boolean value. This will change that timer started value. And in update, it'll go ahead and read that the timer has started and go ahead and update that time. The restart is just going to set that elapsed time back to 0. So while we're mining, this is going to constantly be resetting to 0. And stop timer is also going to reset the timer to 0, and it's going to set the timer started Boolean to false as well. Let's go ahead and finish up the rest of these methods. Alright, we've gone ahead and finished up the rest of these methods. Let's go ahead and go over them. So here in the update, and this is just checking to see if the timer has been started at all. The only way that the timer is going to be started is if this method start timer has been called and changed this Boolean value to true. So we're saying once the timer has started, we're going to go ahead and down to this block. And it's basically saying similar to the block method here where we have the elapsed time is greater than mine time. We have elapsed time is greater than mine interval, and the mine interval is basically how long in between, like how long can you wait between mining before it's gonna reset. And if this elapsed time is greater than the mine interval, then we're gonna go ahead and invoke this event, and that's basically just going to reset the block here. So we have time up $.invoke. It's gonna go down here, and then we have reset block. So on reset, we're going to set the block to being mined false, and then reset the block's elapsed time. And then after this event has been called, we're going to go ahead and set the elapsed time of the timer to 0 and set the timer started to false. It's basically going to fully reset the timer, and we're going to return here so that we don't increase the timer. If the elapsed time is not greater than the time interval, we're going to go ahead and increase that elapsed time by time.delta time. So it's similar to a stopwatch. Down here in start timer, we can just have start timer set to true. Restart timer, we'll just reset the elapsed time. So it's basically going to keep going back to 0 and trying to get up to that time interval over and over again. And then stop timer, we have the elapsed time and timer stop. So this is going to go ahead and fully restart the timer. And noticing it here now, we could actually go ahead and put this stop timer method here, because it's doing the same thing. And so that's the full mine timer class. And next we'll go ahead and get into the scriptable object. Alright, we're here in the item scriptable object script. And the first thing we're going to be doing for all scriptable objects is getting rid of this extension to mono behavior and go ahead and make that a scriptable object. Let's go ahead and flesh out the majority of this script and we'll get right back to it. Alright, so quick and easy script to finish. So here at the very top, just with all of our other scriptable objects, we're going to be adding that line to create an asset menu so we can actually create it in the Unity engine. Next, we have a line here. It's going to give us a range for this float value. And so in this inspector, it's only going to allow us to set the range of this float from 1 to 3. This can obviously be changed depending on whatever you want to do for your game. You want to have it start at 1 because we don't want to have it be decreasing from the time. So if we just have it 1 and we're multiplying that time.delta time by 1, nothing's going to be changing. But if we have it, say, set at 2, we're going to be multiplying that time.delta time value by 2. So we'll have to type twice the speed of mining. And then lastly here we have that item type. So this will be able to determine whether the item in question is a pickaxe, a shovel, or an axe, or any other item you'd like. Alright, so these are all 3 of the scripts we're going to need for this. And the next thing to do is actually going to be to change the scripts that are being used by the first person controller asset. And we'll get right into that here in a second. Alright, here back in the engine, the first thing we're going to need to do by altering the input system. And so this is using the new input system that Unity has. You can find the input system implemented by the first person controller asset down here in the assets. You just go to the input system, then click on the starter assets. It's going to bring up this menu here. And so these have action maps and actions associated with them. If you'd like a more detailed way to understand the input system, I'll leave a link to a video down in the description so you can better understand it. But all we're going to be doing here is going into these player action map actions, and we're going to be adding an action. We'll just call this mine. And so this is going to be the mining action. And then for all of these actions, we need to set a binding. So what button needs to be pressed. For our case, we're going to be using the left mouse button like it is in Minecraft. And so we'll go over here to binding and path. We'll find mouse, and we'll go to left button. And then use in control scheme, we're going to go ahead and do keyboard mouse. And then back in the mine, we want to change the action from button to value. And this makes it so that whenever you actually press down the left mouse button, it's going to be reading that the button is pressed down, and whenever you let go of it, it's going to be reading that the button is no longer pressed down. If you have these other values, it's only going to detect when you press down the button, not when you let go of it. Alright, and then once you have all of these changes, you're going to go ahead and save the asset. If you don't save the asset, it's not going to apply to the rest of it. Then next, we're going to go to the player capsule, and this is included in the first person package. And we're going to go ahead and go down here to the starter asset inputs. And if we go ahead and click on this script, it's a big script here. And we're going to have to add a couple of methods here to enable the function for the mouse. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Alright, so that finishes all the things we're going to be adding to the script. At the very top, we're going to need to add a public bool mine. So this is basically going to tell the other scripts looking at the starter asset inputs whether or not the actual mining action is being performed. So if it is, it'll be set to true. If not, it'll be set to false. This method here, the onMine, this is going to be reacting to that input action that we had just created. So whenever that input action is called, it's going to call this method. And what this mine input is doing is basically going down here, and it's going to be setting that boolean to whatever value is being performed. So if we're pressing down the button, it's going to be setting mine to true with this new mine state. If we're letting go of the mouse button, it's going to be setting this mine value to false. And so this is all we have to change for the starter asset input script. And so this is fully functional. And then next we're going to have to go into the actual character controller included in the first person controller and change some things there to actually get that input. And we'll be right back in a second. Right back here in the engine, we're going to have to go up here to the player capsule and go ahead and click on this script here, the first person controller. It's going to go ahead and open up the script included in the first person controller asset. And so there's a lot going on here. And we're just going to be adding a couple of methods, actually just one method and a serialized field. So let's go ahead and add those and we'll explain them. Right, so that's going to complete what we need to add for the first person controller. Up at the top here we have, and this is just for this specific implementation, we're going to have a serialized field for the current item that the player is using. Obviously in different implementations you'd have an inventory system that would control which item the player is currently using, but for this instance we're just going to go ahead and drag and drop in the inspector to show which item the player is using. Next we have a raycast hit, and this is just going to be used here in the mine method down below. And down here in the mine method, and this is going to be called every single frame. And we're basically determining if the player is holding down the mouse button and that mouse button value is true. So that's what we get here back in the input here. So this mine input, mine equals new mine state. We're just doing input.mine, and if it's true, we're going to go ahead and fire a raycast from the player's current position, and then we're upping it. We're increasing the value on the Y by 1, and essentially this is just to make it so it doesn't shoot out from the player's feet. It's going to shoot out from their stomach, essentially. And so this is the starting position of the raycast, and then next we're going to get the main camera's transform.forward, and since we're using the first-person controller, the forward position will always be where the camera is looking. So we're starting it from the middle of the player and firing it out whichever way the camera's looking. Next we have the out hit, so this is the raycast. So this allows us to go in and actually determine what object was hit. Next we have this 3F. Typically you don't want to use this kind of syntax where you're just throwing in a value. You'd want to put it at the top of the script, but for our instance this is going to be fine. This is just the distance that the raycast is going to shoot. So we have where the raycast is going to start, where it's going to go, and then how far that raycast is actually going to shoot. Next, we're going down here and we're actually doing a try get component. So if this raycast hits something, and if this, what it hits happens to be a block, then we're going to go ahead and get that specific block script, and we're going to go ahead and mine. And back in the block script, we have it here so that we're taking in an item scriptable object, and this is going to determine whether or not we have the correct most efficient item for that block. And we're just throwing in that current item that we used here with a serialized field. And this try get component will also prevent a null reference. So if we click and we're just looking at the sky, it's not going to throw a null reference. It's just going to keep going like nothing happened. And the last thing we need to do here is actually throw this mine in the update part of this function so that it's happening every single frame. So these are all the things we need to change, and next we're actually going to go ahead and implement it in Unity and check it out. Alright, here back in the engine, the first thing we're going to do is actually create some of those item scriptable objects. So we'll go ahead and right click, go up to create, and then item scriptable object. We'll call this a diamond pickaxe. And then here on the right we have that range toggle here. So at the very lowest amount it's going to be set to 1, at the highest it's going to be set to 3. So we'll go ahead and set it to 3 because it's the best item. And then here in the item type, since it's the pickaxe, we'll go ahead and select pickaxe. Then next we'll go ahead and create another one. We'll say this is a diamond shovel, and then same thing, we're going to set it to 3, and this is already a shovel. And so now here in the player capsule we have this current item, which was a serialized field that we added to the script. So it says it's missing an item scriptable object. For the first thing, we're just going to add a diamond pickaxe here. So now the current item that the player is using is going to be a diamond pickaxe. Then next we actually need to create some of these blocks. So we're going to go ahead and create a 3D object cube. We can call it a block. And then we're going to add the block script to it. And then down here in the scene view, we can go ahead and reset the transform. Find where it is. It's going to be on the player. We'll set it right in front, just a little bit higher. And so here on the block script in the inspector, we have the mine time. So this is going to be different for all the blocks, depending. So like in Minecraft, we have obsidian, which takes a very, very long time to mine. For this case, we're just going to set it to 3. So it's going to take 3 seconds to mine if we have like our hand. But if we have a pickaxe, that's going to increase the speed. And the best item for this, actually we'll change this to stone block. And the best item for a stone block is going to be a pickaxe. And then we can go ahead and duplicate this, move it off to the side, and we can call this a grass block. And so the mine time, probably going to be less for that. We'll say it's 2 seconds. And the best item is going to be a shovel. And also just for a little bit of visual addition, I'm going to create a new material, call it grass. Set it to that, and then go ahead and assign this material to the grass block. You don't need to do this. This is just for visual clarity. And for instance, we could also do it, duplicate this, and have this be a wood block. And so the best item for the wood block is going to be an axe. And we'll say this is 2.5 seconds. Then we can go ahead and create another material for it. Just call this wood. And then we can go in here and just set it to a brown color. So there we have a stone block, a grass block, and a wood block. And we can go ahead and try this. The one thing we do need to remember to add for at least this use case is going to be the mine timer. This can be set on any empty game object. Just have a mine timer and the mine interval. So this is going to be the time that the player can go in between actually pressing down the button. We're going to set this to 0.05. So this is a very short time between when the player can let go of the mouse button and continue mining. So essentially, if the player ever lets go, that block is going to be reset, similar to Minecraft. So here, if we go to the player capsule, we have that diamond pickaxe. So we can go ahead and test this here in the engine. Go ahead and run the game. So we have our ability to move, which is the first person player controller. And then if we go up to the block and go ahead and press down that mouse button, there it goes. It goes away and it destroys it. There's no null reference, as you can see in the bottom left. We're not getting any errors. We can just make sure no errors yet. And since the stone block was very efficient to being mined by an iron pickaxe, that's why it was mined so fast. For the wood block, or for the grass block, we hold down that mouse button. It's going to take a little bit longer, and similar for the wood block. So there's just a quick demo, and we can go ahead and go back, go to this player capsule and change it to a diamond shovel. So for this case, the stone block and the wood block are going to take a lot longer. We hold it down, hold down the button, it takes a lot longer. Same thing for the wood block, but for the grass block it should be very quick. So there, it took a little amount of time. And then if you wanted to create another item, we can go ahead and create an item scriptable object. We can call this a stone axe. And you can say the mining speed, you can set that to 1.5. And this is an axe. Let's go ahead and change this, the current item, to a stone axe. And so for the grass and the stone blocks, it's just going to take the time that the blocks were set in the inspector. So this should take 2 seconds-ish. There you go. This should take 3 seconds. And then by default, this would take 2.5 seconds, but since we have the stone axe and the axe is proficient against wood, this should take less time. And there we go. So this was a quick and easy tutorial on how you can implement the mining function to, from Minecraft into Unity. If you have any suggestions or comments to make this better, please feel free to leave them down in the comments. I'd love to know what I could have done better and what I did wrong, because we're all learning and I'm here to learn and get better. So thank you everybody, and stay tuned for the next one.